I've just said that we want to look at the meaning and purpose of law. We want to look at the priority and place of law in personal and social life. We want to look at the influence of law on personal leadership and the influence of personal philosophy on legislation or on law as a whole. And we want to look at the place of conscience, natural law, and morality. So these are some of the things that we want to look at. Um, just in case you need any assistance, just indicate on through the chat button, and we can bring the assistance to you as quickly as possible. So if you can hear me, I'll just ride on, and we'll continue to look at this. So I was just talking about this picture that you can see on the screen, and you will notice a cluster of heavenly bodies, I would say, things that exist naturally in our solar system. And the beauty of all this is we don't hear that these objects or these entities collide, and so that we have any chaos that is threatening our Earth. So, and that beauty amazes me a lot, especially when you look at the whole galaxy, the Milky Way, and the whole universe as a whole, and you begin to see several heavenly bodies. Look at the Mars, the Moon, the various stars, the planets, and for some good reason, they all seem to work in beautiful coherence without clashing, without crossing the various orbits or colliding. And this is really, really beautiful. So, and it occurs to me that well couldn't possibly be an accident. And I want to make this statement, therefore, that law is inherent in nature and all of creation. Law is inherent in nature and all of creation. So there is some law, and this is established by all the bodies of knowledge that we have, whether you're talking about astronomy, astrophysics, or physics, or all the various bodies of knowledge that we have. They all agree on that point, that there is some kind of law that govern our solar system and the universe as we know it. Not just that, the law governing all created elements produce order. That law produces order. And we can see that order, especially when you look through all the scientific telescopes, you see the beauty of the universe, and we just know that this is orderly. As many as those bodies are, as a matter of fact, those bodies are far more numerous than all of the buildings we have on Earth. They are far more numerous than all of the cars we have on Earth. And isn't it interesting that every now and then cars collide? A few things do happen on our roads, but as numerous as all these beings are, all these objects are, we don't hear that they collide and witness any known explosions that throw us into some form of jeopardy. So elements in nature seem to know purpose and place in existence. Maybe that's why everything is so orderly, because they know their function, they know their place in existence. If it is even such that astronomers or astrologists are able to note certain patterns among the constellations, so they can say this is the Great Bear, this is the Scorpion, this is the Leo, and I think that's how we come about some of the zodiac signs that people talk about. So all of this just show the order that we have in our solar system. Now, the knowledge of purpose, position, and precedence creates order, and of course, that order is what we observe as beauty. So still, we can, and I came about this phrase or this sentence earlier today as I was just thinking about this, and I was saying, I was just imagining how all of this came about, and I wrote that I thought to establish law and order of things, and beauty results. So Beauty was not the intention. It was simply an aftermath of the establishment of law and order of all things. So if in fact we go into a garden and we try to put all the flowers in order, the grasses in order, remove all of the stones that are out of place, all of that, and put everything back where they should be, the result is always a thing of beauty. I remember my dad would say, say to us as children, he would say, have a place for everything and keep everything in its place. And that produces order, which external parties or even ourselves observe as beauty. Now, let's quickly define law from what we see in our dictionaries. Now, law is defined as the system of rules that a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and may enforce by the imposition of penalties. So notice those system of rules which the community or the country stipulates and that are enforceable by penalties. I will also say that not only can they be enforced, are they enforceable by imposition of penalties, they can also be rewarded, when they are adhered to. Another definition says a statement of fact deduced from observation to the effect that a particular natural or scientific phenomenon always occurs if certain conditions are present. For some of us who are a bit scientific in our persuasions, we know about the law of motion that we studied in physics. And it does say that every object assumes a place of rest until a force moves it from that position of inertia. So, but other than that, it will always be in its place. All right. So those are just some of the laws that we feed into our discussion as we progress. Law, again, is a system of rules that are enforced through social institutions. And one of those could be our courts, our law courts, to govern behavior. So you can see from that law is actually intended. One of the reasons why you have law is to govern behavior. If we don't have law, for example, on our roads where we have road signs and speed limits, then if I have a very good car, I can decide to exercise all of the possibilities of the horsepower of my vehicle. And somebody who has a lesser engine may say, well, I can only go as far as I'm permitted as my engine permits me to. So what do you have? You have somebody who wants to run to the limits, and you have somebody who is inhibited by the capacity of the engine. And so what you have is an imbalanced society where, well, we will see one of the results when we have that. So law can be made by legislatures through legislation resulting in statutes. Statutes are, as the name implies, things that seem fixed. The executive through decrees and regulations, or judges through binding precedent, normally in common law jurisdictions. So these are some of the definitions I found on the internet just to define law and give context to the discussion. Now, let's look at the foundation of law. So everything in life is built on the foundation of law. And when I say everything, I can underline everything. Think about it. The water bodies that we have are known to maintain a particular boundary. And so there's some kind of law that keeps them in that space. That is why, if for any reason those water bodies overflow their banks, chaos ensues, and the whole city or even the country is thrown into panic. Why? We expect the sea to behave itself within its boundaries. We expect the sun to shine. We expect the rain to rain and to stop at some point. We expect things to stay where they are if we put them there without them floating away. So everything in our world, in our existence, is it has the foundation, is based on law. Okay. Now everything in life is regulated and governed by law. I mean, that is still alluding to that first statement. Law regulates and governs everything. The foundation of law of society apparently is law. Okay, these are assertions. We'll look to back them up as we progress. But these are assertions worthy of some thoughts. The foundation of law of society is law. Not only that, society is kept in order because of law. Well, I think that makes sense. Our societies are the way they are based on, well, the enforcement or adherence to law or otherwise. So that's why it's I mean, possible to see certain environments where you say, well, the rule of law isn't taking its due place. And so you have some kind of governance in those areas compared to other areas where maybe laws are strengthened and enforceable through the various arms or functions of government. And so you find that the society that is produced is always in response or in respect of the law that produces the order, the known order in that environment. Now, nations of the earth themselves are only as strong as citizens' obedience to law. So think about it. If citizens, for some reason, do not obey the law of the nation, what tends to happen is over time, you begin to have a chaotic environment where, well, nothing really seems to work properly. So law is the glue that holds the country together. These are like blanket statements that when we think about them, we can see their real significance. And of course, law, our culture, is a product of law. That statement is very weighty, and I can explain that maybe very briefly, but I think I'll go on and I'll have an opportunity to explain that. But definitely, law produces culture. Why? If we say that it is forbidden for anyone to drive on the left-hand side of the road, and that is enforceable by law, over time, our culture becomes that we drive on the right side of the road, and if anybody does something contrary to that, it is seen as abnormal. And so our culture says this is where to go when you're on the road. That's just one simple example, but we'll go on. Misconceptions about law. Well, even if I stop here and just sort of look at this, we know that there are a lot of misconceptions as far as law is concerned. There are a lot of things that we think about law. There are a lot of things that our culture, our environment, our the various, even our backgrounds also say about law. There are things that come to our mind when we hear law. Sometimes when we hear law, the first thing that comes to mind is fear. That, right, I've seen something that has the capacity to limit my options, to possibly punish me, and so on and so forth. So there are things that come to mind when we talk about law. Let's look at some of those misconceptions. And I will switch back now, and we can talk about those. Now, there are a number of misconceptions, as I said, and one of the things is that there's a thought that law inhibits creativity and limits freedom. So, and that's why in certain environments, people look to circumvent law so that they can do as they please. Sometimes even people who want to exercise their ability to create things in the scientific world or other kind of environment, also, if they have the wrong notion about law, they think, well, law actually prevents me or prevents us from doing this. So people think that law limits freedom. Sometimes people also think that law is an end in itself. And I like to say that law is made for man and not man for law. Meaning that law should serve and help mankind to live orderly, and not that mankind should worship or serve the law. So law itself is a process, there's an intent to law. There's a reason why law is put in place. And that's why we talk about the code and the spirit of law. The spirit of law means the intention, what we intend to achieve by instituting this law. So law, some other people think that law is set out to punish individuals and entities. Yes, that is one side of the coin, and it's actually true that law could punish certain people or entities. Entities being a company, we've heard about companies that are being fined for certain violations of law. But that's not the whole story. Law is not only set out to punish, law is also set out to enable individuals and entities, companies, and so on to function properly. All right. So, other people believe that law favors the rich and the influential. Well, in a place where people can manipulate law, then that's probably true, but that's not the intent of law. So those folks think that law can be manipulated without consequence, and that is very far from the truth. Law, I'm talking about original and true laws, cannot be violated without consequence. Think about this. If somebody says, I want to light fire because I reserve the right to, and I can throw my cigarette stub on the dry grass because I have the right to, or because I can. Well, the law in our society says, once you finish, even if you have to do it, and when you finish, put the stub in a place, put out the fire. But if somebody thinks otherwise, well, the consequence of it is that can start a whole conflagration that can, threaten lives and properties. So other people also think that law is that mankind actually is the apex lawmaker. That should be mankind. Now, well, men do make laws, but we will soon find out that actually laws do not originate from man in the first instance. Man is, as it were, handed out law by a being superior to man himself. And then some other people think that law is not connected to morality. And my argument is that actually law has everything to do with morality. In fact, law actually, in most cases, dictates and reveal morality. All right, so we'll go on. These are things that we can think about, and we have our own various opinions on them. But let's look at the purpose of law, therefore. And it's that law protects and guarantees the continuous functioning of products and the integrity of design. What do I mean by that? Law, rather than being a source of punishment or a tool of punishment, is actually a tool of protection. Okay, we use products, maybe electronics. In fact, one of the common ones are mobile phones. Now, when we get our mobile phones, when we purchase them in the first instance, we have a book of law, and I call it a book of law. It's a manual that is put on that product, and that book stipulates how that product should be used to protect it and to guarantee its continuous functioning and to maintain and protect its design. Okay, now any violation of that will simply make that product utterly useless. And that's why, or think about the hair dryer that women use. That, for example, should never be used in the bathtub that is full of water. It should never ever be used, because that product will respect its own design, and it has the capability to, cause damage if it is violated. So law actually is meant to protect. So hearing something like "do not operate this near water," that is not a statute of limitation, no, and it's not a statute of protection, and also guarantees continuous functioning. Now, law again establishes the basis of relationships between entities and groups. Now, imagine that there is no law in banking, for example, such that when we give our money to the banks, there's no way to get them back. Then it just means that as far as the banks are more powerful than the individuals, then they can simply just hold on to the money and never release them again. But there is a law that stipulates the relationship between the individual and the business. There is a law that says this is how citizens should relate to one another. One of such is, for example, our motor insurance laws. If, God forbid, an accident happens, there is a law that says this is how you can settle the matter. And that, and that is the power of law. Law establishes that. Again, law establishes the rights of individuals and entities and prevents anarchy. Absolutely. And that is a straightforward thought, that law has the purpose to protect the rights of people or of entities. And that's why someone can start a business, and you can expect to do a business in peace as long as you do not violate the laws. And of course, it also prevents anarchy, because if someone barges into your organization, you can always call the law. It's interesting that when we call police, we're actually saying we call the law, because the police, for example, the police force is seen as an office of the law. And so one of the purposes of law is to prevent anarchy. Now, another thought is that law establishes norm. And I like that word norm, because one of the root words, one of the root meaning of law, I think from either Greek or Latin, possibly Latin, is the word nomos. And the word nomos is the word from where we find the word norm, which means law establishes what is normal within an organization, within a society, within a family, within a nation. So law establishes norm. So which means law can help to pinpoint what is an abnormal. So that's one of the functions or purposes of law. Then again, law promotes order and peaceful coexistence or peaceful cohabitation. Or simply put, law promotes order and peace. Why do we have law? Now, think about the relationship between citizens in a particular country. Now, the purpose of law is to establish what can be done and what cannot be done, such that if there's a violation of rights and privileges, then there can be a basis for settlement in court. And when people go to court, they do not actually go to an individual. They go to the body of constitution within that land, or they go to the law of the land, and they seek to get a redress, or they seek justice. And why do they seek justice? So that there can be a re-establishment of order and enforcement of right, resulting in peace. So we can say that the purpose of law is to produce peace. And that's why when you talk about the police, we always say that their job is to maintain law and order. And when you have what law and order, you end up with a peaceful state of existence. Now, law again reveals morality and produces culture. Well, we can say that all day, because the law that someone produces indicate and reflect the morals of that individual. So if somebody says that it is forbidden to tolerate corruption in an environment, that tells that that individual has a moral sense that does not permit any act of corruption. And of course, if that kind of law, for example, is reinforced over and over and enforced, soon afterwards, you begin to have a society where the culture changes from that of impunity to that of, you know, returns to norm. You know, I can talk about one of my favorite countries, and just a change of government seemed to have driven a sense of, fear into individuals to not think that it cannot be business as usual anymore. And such is the power of law, or an entity that is seen to be able to enforce law. Now, the hope is that individuals on this platform, or who are connected to this platform, or who get to lay hands on our materials, we begin to sort of see themselves as agents of such positive change, who can influence policies in the right way, who can influence law in the right way in any environment, so that we begin to produce or reveal the morality that is that of the kingdom, in order to produce a different kind of culture within our environments. All right, so we'll go on very briefly just to talk about this. Is going to be very brief. There may be a series or another presentation where we talk about the different types of law, but I'll just gloss over this very quickly. And so in the first instance, I'm going to talk about the laws of nature. And we can see that laws are inherent in nature. We said that again before, but everything that we see, when you go to the Amazon forest or to the rainforest, you see you see life, teeming on all of the terrain. And as much as you have all of those trees, those shrubs and all that, they seem to have one sense of unwritten law that they all obey. So each of them has law infused into its creation, into its behavior, and it's visible across all the terrain. Creation actually was designed to function by law that keep order. So creation, if you look at creation, there is some sense of order. In fact, I like to watch the Geographic Channel a lot, and you see when fishes are in the sea and they go in their schools, they don't attend schools, but they swim in schools, and you can see that school is so beautiful. You wonder who is teaching, who has instructed these fishes to behave this way. No, they are not instructed. The law is written into their genetic code, right? Now, in fact, I can say that the genetic code is actually a body of law written into every created entity. Now, vegetation grows as they do because of law. Of course they do, because we don't tell a seed of corn to sprout once it's put into the earth. The law is inherent, and in fact, I think that the law of seed is the law of automation, because once you create a seed, once you plant a tree, or once you have a plant that can produce its seed, then you don't need to create that plant again. The existence of that, or the continued existence of that plant, is automated. And I think that's the brilliance of what God has done. So seed produce trees because of a law that is inherent in their genetic function. Now, of course, look at rainforest as well. Even rainfall is governed by law. Water goes from the earth, is trapped in clouds. When once saturated, pours it back on the earth, and the cycle goes on and on. That is a law in itself. And so we can say this, that everything is held on the earth or to the earth because of the law which we call gravity. And that is suggestive. Imagine that we don't have gravity as we speak, then most of us are probably floating in the air just now as we speak. It means we can throw things, and we could never place anything in a place because they will keep just floating away. And so even gravity, that law shows how the earth is meant to function. And the thing is this: laws do not create themselves. They may be inherent in nature, but there's a suggestion that, well, that's an input into nature, right? But let's go. Now let's see what happens if law is violated. Now, I said before that law is not an end in itself. As a matter of fact, laws actually have consequences when they are violated or when they are obeyed. Now, when we hear the word consequences, normally it's taken in a negative light, but that's not always the case, because one of the consequences may be positive, which is that it produces the peace or the joy that is, or the happiness that is desired. But the violation of law in this instance actually produces negative results, which we want to look at as just the consequences. So wherever there is disorder, we can be sure that there is violation of law. So disorder is nothing but the violation of law. Think about that. If the sea is meant to stay in its place and the sea violates the law of its boundaries and comes over land, or let's say, let's turn it around. Let's say humankind, because of their engineering abilities, decide to claim part of the sea, and the sea endures that for a while and decides to revolt and comes over land again. You could tell that in that transaction there's been an violation of law, or either of the boundaries or of the law by which each of the entities function. So now we talk about outer space, and that's why I have that the picture of that astronaut there. The outer space is a region that is governed by a law outside of the law of gravity. So which means when a law is violated, then automatically another law is triggered. Look at the law of aerodynamics. When I was studying that back in the day, when I was doing my A-levels physics, I was just studying my A-level physics. And what I saw was that the law of aerodynamics is such that when an aeroplane is running on the tarmac, on the runway, and it gets to a point where it approaches that speed of sound, and at that point, it is utterly dangerous to keep the aircraft on the ground. Another law must be triggered, which is the law of aerodynamics. And so what the pilots do is they just move the lever, tilt off the nozzle of the plane, and the plane simply glides away into the air. At that point, another law has been triggered, apart from the law of gravity, which had kept the plane on the tarmac hitherto. So at that point, the law of aerodynamics is taken over from the law of gravity. So there are times when laws are violated in court, and the violation is a desired result, just like the switch from gravity to aerodynamics. But there are times when laws are violated with consequences that are undesirable. So, but in this case, look at the outer space. Astronauts can function in there only because of the way the law of gravity behaves in that region. As a matter of fact, the law of gravity is nearly almost zero in that environment. So all laws can be broken, therefore, either for good or for in a bad sense. All laws can be broken for good or otherwise. So, and that's where this comes in, that when laws are broken, well, we cannot expect that the status quo will remain as is. So when one law is broken, another law is automatically triggered. Okay, and violation of a known law triggers the law of uncertainty, especially when there is no preparation to act when the other law is triggered. Now, in the case of aeroplanes, when the law of aerodynamics is triggered, the engineers already have preparation for that, so they know what to do afterwards. But let's say somebody was just experimenting and accidentally triggers that law of aerodynamics and does not know what to do, he enters into the realms of uncertainty. And of course, there's only one thing that ensues: chaos and total loss of control. So violation of law produces chaos and loss of control when the capacity to govern that new status does not exist. All right, just a few thoughts. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story which my grandfather taught me as a child. A story very short, but I think it's going to reinforce this whole idea. Let me switch the screen so you can hear the story. Now, the story was told about a group of animals who live together in harmonious existence. And what will happen was that, they could interact freely, but they had rules that govern their existence. So we had the lion, we had the leopard, we had the adder, or what you call the viper, we had the dog and the cat. So they all lived together in this small community and everything was fine. Now, but to make sure everything was okay, the lion told all the animals that, look, I do not like anyone to stare at me or look at me directly in the eye. Said that sets everything out of control for me and I do not like it. Right. Now the leopard said, look, my coat is very important to me. And every now and then I clean it up. And so I always try to look speck and pan. I don't want any dirt on my coat at any point in time for no reason. Now the other said, well, you can play with me, you can handle me as you will, but do not touch my tail because that can trigger uncoordinated response and very, very strange actions. The cat said, look, I can be friendly, but there are times when I need to be in my corner and just play by myself. And at that point in time, I do not want to be disturbed. And of course, the dog said, look, I can play with anybody. I like to play. I like to check on everybody. I'm a communal animal. I want to make sure everybody's okay. So when I come around, please bear with me. I'm just exercising my friendliness. So they went on for days and years and everything was fine. Now, it happened on a particular day that the dog and the cat went on a hunting expedition and they had a very good outing. So they returned to their various homes and apparently the dog has a very quick recovery ability, whereas the cat thought, well, I'm just going to stay at home today and just kind of pick up my energy again. So the dog left his house to the cats, and whilst there, the cat happened to be playing in his corner, just trying to really get by all by itself. So the dog got in there, said, hey, Mr. Cat, how are you doing today? The cat, well, gave a very short, very unwelcoming response because it just didn't want to be bothered. But the dog was none the wiser and it kept on troubling. And eventually the cat reacted in a very nasty way. And soon after, a fight ensued. Now, it so happens that the cat lives just nearby to the leopard. And as the fight was going on, a lot of dust was being thrown and some of them landed on the leopard. Oh my, the leopard was mad with anger and reacted so strangely and was going to pounce and really deal with these two unruly elements. And as they were doing all this and the whole place was in uproar, the viper or the adder happened to just be having a nap under the tree nearby. And as they were all in struggles and moving about, someone trampled on the tail of the viper and the viper snapped and the whole place was in utter uproar. Now, the lion at this time was having a strategy meeting at the community just to look at how do we make the environment safer, how do we get even better and all that. And the noise was unbecoming and unbearable. So the lion had to come out and say, hey, he had to summon all of them and say, guys, what's going on here? And well, as the leopard, being the elder statesman among them, was going to say, look, I was just about my own business, and this unruly folks threw some dust at me, and he stared into the lion's face. And just incidentally, all of them too, because they were focused on none other but the lion, they were all staring at the lion. And the lion lost his head and said, look, this is it. Even I am being disrespected now, and we can no longer live together. Now, he now said, well, for everybody's good, get away from me and let everybody maintain its own quarters far away from me. And of course, because everybody was in some kind of fight or the other, they all had to move away from their various quarters and into their various present environment. That's why some people say that the cat and the dog don't I mean, they still fight to this day and so on. But well, that's just a little story. But the import of this is that each individual has his personal authority that is guaranteed by law, and when that is violated, you have an undesired result that is just unpleasant, and that's why we're talking about this part of it, that law is the source of personal authority, and every being, every individual has his personal authority that is enshrined in law. We can say that also about the authority of a business to trade, the authority of an individual to get about his business, to go to school, to do all sorts. So that is enshrined in law, and everybody has it. Now, personal authority, this is just an attempt to define it. It's an endowment based on design and guaranteed by law by the law of intended function. So personal authority is meant for the individual to do what it's intended to do. So I can extend that by saying that the trumpet is authorized to play its unique sign, that is a unique sound that is unique to trumpet. The drum, the sea is authorized to roar as it does. The lion is authorized to roar. The dog is authorized to bark as it does. That is enshrined, that is ingrained in its nature. So personal authority defines the right and privileges guaranteed by the creator or maker of a thing, which is why the iron has the authority to be hot when plugged into the electric socket, and the thermostat or the regulator is turned to certain modes, one mode or the other. So personal authority must not be violated in order to preserve the integrity and the function of the created entity. So where personal authority is violated, then I think that's why we also have the law court, where we seek redress. So now, if those personal authority are guaranteed by the creator or the maker of a thing, then let's look very briefly at divine laws. This is that the divine laws are laws inherent in creation and instituted by God. Divine laws originate from God without man's consent. In other words, God did not confer with man to say, what shall we do today? What should we say this environment should be governed? No, it was entirely a divine prerogative. Now, divine laws pre-exist and are superior to other bodies or forms of law. Divine laws have no non-adverse side effects. Let me give an example. You should honor your father and your mother. I don't know any side effect to that. Or you should not steal. I do not think that law has any side effect. Or you should not take what belongs to your neighbor. I think there is no side effect to that at all. That is adverse. Anyway, now everything created has capacity to obey divine laws. Now, but as much as they have capacity to obey, they also have capacity to also violate those divine laws through the exercise? Well, not everything apparently, but you can tell that mankind is uniquely placed in a position to exercise his free will, either to submit to divine laws or to violate them. And that is a prerogative, a divine, um, a divine endowment that has been given to man. But the thing is this: violation of divine laws is at the root of all societal ills. If somebody steals, then the society cannot benefit from the item that is meant to be a resource for all. When somebody takes somebody else's property or violates somebody else's wife and so on and so forth, well, you can tell that, well, the court will be full, and the society simply can't be at peace because of violation of laws that compromise the normal function of society. So the purpose of divine law is actually to educate the human heart. And I say the human heart, and when I'm talking about heart, most of the time I always say that it is not that thing that is on the chest. In psychology, or that school of thought, or that body of learning, we know that the heart is actually the center of the mind. It is the place where all that is believed, all that is accepted as truth, are stored. So the heart is not the blood pumping machine, but the seat of the mind. So divine laws actually, they are in a unique place to perfectly educate the human heart. Not only that, divine laws actually reawakens dead conscience and re-educates conscience. There comes a time when the conscience is seared or has become numb, or through subliminal messages has become uh, insensitive to certain elements of morality. And what divine laws do is to reawaken and re-educate the conscience of man. Now, talking about conscience, and I like that word a lot, conscience. If you look at the etymology of that word and break it into two, you have con, which is the togetherness or together, from where we have confluence or concord, together. And then the other word is actually what we pronounce as science, which means knowledge, or some people call it, in Greek, you call it science. Now, that word conscience actually means the body of knowledge, the body of knowledge in man. You can call it the library of the man, the library of the man. In computer science, when you build a computer, there's a place where you impute system instructions, and that becomes the conscience of the computer, and that is stored in the kernel of the computer or in the hard disk. So that becomes the conscience of the computer. Now, what divine law does is to re-educate that place where you have the original instructions put into the man. That's why, as a child, when we do something at that point, the blood seems to pump adrenaline. When conscience is violated, for a conscience that is alive, it triggers adrenaline that says, "Hey, don't do that," and the blood pumps faster, just to trigger a response to warn and to disengage from that action. So what divine laws do is they reawaken and re-educate conscience. Now, the import of this is that divine law ought to be the foundation of culture, because we said earlier on that law actually produces culture. Now, the intent of divine law is actually to produce the culture that governs us, so that, well, in our culture, we do not steal. In our culture, we do not violate other people's properties. In our culture, we respect our parents. In our culture, we live, we love one another. In our culture, we love and acknowledge God. And that's what culture. Now, this is not meant to produce a religion, as we will see shortly, soon afterwards. Now, look at that verse of scripture. It says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul." So the purpose of law, like I said, re-educating the conscience, is to restore the soul back to its original knowledge. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So when simpleton enters into the mind, the purpose of the law is to return the mind to its wisdom, the way to apply the original knowledge that it's exposed to. Now, and again, the follow-on scripture says the precept. Remember a while ago, last month, we spoke a lot about precept, which is the original law, the original idea of the Lord. They are right, and they make the heart rejoice. So when you know the precept, when you know the original law, the intent, the spirit of the law, it actually gladdens the heart. And of course, the commandment of the Lord is pure. So when God says, "This is my law," it is pure. It has no ulterior motive. And because it has no ulterior motives, it can make the eye see clearly without any ulterior motive, without any uh, any myopia or hypermetropia or any such thing. That is the power of divine laws. But let's go on quickly as we attempt to begin to wrap up. So the divine laws, they are so powerful, and they constitute all that is good or should be good in our nature. Okay. So as we progress, I'm going to also talk about a few other things. So now I'll just try to round up now. One of the things that we saw that God mentioned was that God never introduced himself as a religious entity. So the divine laws are not intended to produce religion. In fact, he said, "I'm a king." And because of this reason, I came about. I did not come as a religious person, but I came as a king. And what does that mean? If he's a king, and he says he also comes from a country, so, and he says he has a kingdom, so we can say emphatically that, well, if you have a kingdom, kingdoms are governments. So if you have a country, you have a government, then its laws therefore cannot be looked at as ritual laws, but as the laws of his own countries, which are his national laws. So, and that is where I'm driving at, where we'll try to hang this discussion tonight, that the laws of God are actually not ritual laws, but they are laws that govern a society, a government, or a nation. And so, if it then says that, look, I was going to read a place in, I think it's Matthew chapter 16 and from verse 18 to 19, where he says that Peter has just given a brilliant answer to a question, and he said, "Look, Peter, now that you know that I am Messiah, the anointed king," which is what Christ means, he said, "Now I also can establish my own government, my own parliament." And my parliament is very different from what you know to date. And he said something, which is where I'm going. He said, "And now I'm giving you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." He always said that it's from heaven, which means, and which it spoke about heaven in the context of a country. So now said, "Look, I'm giving to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." And he said, "And I give you the right to operate those keys so that from earth you can influence heaven." What does that mean? The power of citizenship, of a citizen, is the ability to use the constitution to his or her benefit. And that's why citizens are not religious entities. Citizens are governmental entities. Citizens are governmental entities. So, and that is where I'm coming to in this discussion, as a way of rounding up, that our true power is in being able, is first in the first instance is knowledge of the laws of the kingdom of God, the knowledge of natural laws, which incidentally are products of God's laws himself, and the application of those laws, so that we're not just having influence on earth, we're also with those laws influencing the government of heaven. So that's where I want us to round up tonight. And I'm hoping that we can pick up from there when we convene next week. So I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope we're able to pick up one thing or the other. If you have contributions, it would be lovely to hear them, or to maybe if it's a bit late tonight, we can always probably start with questions the next time we meet before we go into the discussion. So, but watch out in the course of the week, at the end of the month, actually, we're having one of us who is speaking to us. I said I wasn't to reveal our identity later on, and I think I will. I think I should. She's very much one of us, and she's been preparing herself, and she's going to speak on servant leadership. And by name, she's Grace Adage. So, and that's a way of encouragement, I hope, for all of us to also, share our insights so that we can learn together. So, thank you for joining us tonight, or this morning or afternoon, in case you are on another continent. And we are happy and delighted to have you with us. So, have a very wonderful day, and God bless you. Bye now.